from another hemisphere. But, you know, as I say, I started the day by getting cleaned up and then putting on some 24-hour crystal mineral deodorant roll on in the lavender white tea scent. And is that why this gnat is following me around the house, or is that because I have a bunch of apples in the kitchen that I have to make fresh apple juice out of and put a little ginger and fresh lemon in it as well? That's gonna be delightful either with breakfast or after breakfast. And then I also spritzed on this delicious sample of Maison Margiela Paris Replica. It's a reproduction of familiar scents and moments of varying locations and periods. So this very feminine and floral fragrance, which would be perfect for a brunch or a first date, is Beach Walk. The provenance and period is Calvi 1972. Fragrance description is sun-kissed salty skin, and it definitely delivers that. And style description is female fragrance for anyone who is seeking to be female presenting. The beach walk description inside the sample, and it's just this little cute tiny spray bottle, but enough for you to kind of get a taste of what I guess the full-size purchase would be like. The notes are of ylang ylang bergamot, which is the fragrance that you find in Earl Grey tea, and pink peppercorn, the fragrance of the beach and salt sprayed skin, a summer's day. That almost starts to sound like a poem, but this is lovely, and we will see how far this non-aluminum salt deodorant gets us. I have a friend who had a comedy routine about, he had friends in college at Howard University in Washington, D.C., and one of the people from school was from a foreign country and strictly used the aluminum-free crystal deodorant, and it did not work. And he hesitated to invite him to parties because it would be an issue on the dance floor. But in any case, we are going to get down with what we tried yesterday, which is this LA Girl Pro Conceal in the shade Fairest. And we dotted this on yesterday and it looked kind of spectacular. Thought we might start with that and then get into a contour shade of some kind. You know, maybe even experimenting with a dark shade also from our friends at LA Girl. We certainly have a lot of options, and we're trying to pare things down to the most effective options. So that's part of our game here as we figure out life on a Sunday morning. I hope you got good sleep and that you are in good spirits today because, you know, certainly people continue to challenge us intellectually and otherwise. You know, I've been recruited onto a live. I had been listening to this creator named Chime Philly, who's been doing a lot of coverage of different things, but a lot of coverage on I think that Lushious Massacr has accused or implied an accusation, allegedly, that some other creators here on YouTube were bullying her, and specifically that they were part of the reason, if not the reason, that she went to Hollywood to work and then left in somewhat short order. In any case, you know, it's been a lot of discussion, and it's certainly been a lot more interesting to me than some of the stale drama that involves, you know, same old, you know, Trisha Paytas around and, you know, James Charles around and different people who, you know, it just, there don't ever seem to be consequences. Sorry, I washed my brushes and sponges and I put them in the sun to dry. But, you know, you kind of get fatigued hearing the same stories and the same discussions. So I think what was appealing to me about Chime Philly was that at least this is fresh subject matter and a personality that I've certainly watched from the time that she did work with Rich Lux, and, you know, enjoyed their stories of bookstores and other adventures. But, you know, that relationship soured. there was an extended relationship with Jeffree Star and Dustin Daly and Nick Snider and some other drama YouTubers that, you know, it was interesting to me. And certainly in quarantine, there was plenty of time, that Nat again, to figure out, you know, just by listening to people's different discussions and stories, like what was real, what was imagination. You know, I think that when things don't go well, we can always ascribe ill will toward people that we have whatever level of conflict with. But, you know, I kind of went on a live that was on my feed last night, and Chime Philly was discussing, you know, some of the controversies he's covered. And, you know, there were people who are supporters of Lushious Massacre who were on that live who, you know, were saying quite threatening things. You know, it's fine to support someone, but it's not fine to, you know, threaten reporting and all these other things, because honestly, Chime Philly is just using, you know, the things that Luscious Massacre has said publicly on her channel in the past and in the recent past. There's no gotcha, because there's nothing that's been made up. It's all just a product of whatever Luscious Massacre has said and how she's represented anything from her experience in Hollywood and Los Angeles, California, the reasons that she gave for, you know, kind of abandoning that dream and moving back to Brownsville, Texas. You know, that truly there was a discussion that Luscious did go to work in Hollywood and then left, and said initially it was because she missed her family. Then there was a discussion of, oh, you know, the enemigas, so to speak, were allegedly to blame for bullying her and kind of ruining her opportunity in Hollywood. And, you know, that certainly is distressing, right? And it was also distressing. I watched a live that Luscious Massacre did with Divina Garza, and they were talking about Divina being scammed by a car dealership, right? And it sounded like the people who did it stole parts or stole her vehicle and then sent the ill-gotten gain to Mexico. And it's distressing when your own people victimize you, right? Is it driven by poverty? Is it driven by profit? Is it just people size you up and figure out that maybe they can get away with it? You know, and it was interesting to hear Luscious Massacre and Davina ask men to join them to go, you know, pursue justice at this dealership, you know, because of like gender roles and also just needing, you know, backup, right? I don't know how vigorous the, you know, consumer protection and you know, sort of small claims court activity is in Texas, because it's a right to work state. It is very anti activist government. It's definitely a smaller government place. And indeed, people here in California who work in unions often will go move to states like Oregon and Texas because they'll have a lighter tax burden, but then you suffer the consequences of that when you have a consumer issue, when you have, you know, something like freezing temperatures and a lack of infrastructure where the, you know, electrical grid or whatever kind of power people need to heat their homes, it goes on the fritz because of deregulation. I know that's so boring, but my point is, Luscious Massacre with Divina Garza, I kind of have developed a theory. Now, this is an alleged theory, just because a couple of things don't seem to fit together in my mind, right? I'm just getting this very pale concealer on in the places where we might want a little lift in tone, and I was very satisfied with the finish of this product as I applied it this way yesterday. As you know, one of our other scandalized makeup gurus, John McClane, would say, we're in pursuit of seamlessness, right? He's another person, or she, is another person who's gotten into a little trouble for saying, you know, perhaps some uncharitable things about people of color. And certainly we appreciate her artistry, but that's not cool, right? We appreciate Lushious Massacre's artistry, but certain remarks and characterizations of people of color have not been cool. Same old, same old. Time for an apology. Fess up, because you're working with Black people. And that's just not, you know, it's just not going to fly. The jig is up, right? In as much as we've been discouraged to, you know, listen to or go to Chime Philly's channel, the cat's out of the bag. But getting back to the narrative, when there's this vehement repetition of the idea, right, suggested by Lushious Massacre and her fans, that people like Rich Lux or Dustin Daly or Jeffree Star at one point, because we know that Lushious is now friendly with Jeffree Star and has removed negative comments that she made about him and his infamy from her channel. You know, Nick Snider and perhaps other beauty gurus, she seemed to suggest, allegedly, that those folks were responsible for her departure from Hollywood. How could that possibly work, right? I ended up working in Hollywood, and I've certainly worked with some infamous characters over the years, people who've left the country because of, you know, accusations of SA, people who've been sued, people who have gone to jail and gotten out because of accusations of inappropriate conduct and all of that. That's a normal Tuesday in the entertainment world and also in the political world. Let's be real. Adults do things. But, you know, to say that whole grown adults were responsible for ruining your career chances, I bought it. I was like, wow. For months, years, I was like, wow, as I was kind of learning about these people and their conflicts on YouTube. But it somehow didn't add up for me. And as someone who works in scripted television, and I've been a producer in reality television, it doesn't make sense to me that people who are YouTubers, who don't live in California, who are not members of any union, could have any influence. They're not producers. They don't work in any broadcast or network or, you know, cable company, streamer company capacity in LA, right? Nikita Dragon's on a Netflix series, but she's not, these aren't power players. They're not people who can, you know, decide your fate as a worker. But I will tell you that if you are coming from a right to work state like Texas, hold on, if you are coming to another state expecting to be able to land and have your portfolio and your body of work and your talent, and you think that's going to be enough to get you work on set, slow down. That's not how it works in California. We have a very long, storied history of unions who control who gets on set. This is a town that's run by agents and agencies and also by unions. And if you want to step onto a set and work, you're not going to be able to do that without the, you know, go ahead from various unions, right? There is a way for you as a non-union worker to join those unions and become able to work. But if you turn up here and you think that just by talent alone, right, talent and will and you know, availability alone, that you're going to be able to step onto union sets, right? That's the real work, where the real money and the real protections and, you know, the real people are, especially in the scripted world. It's impossible. And in my mind, that may have been what turned Lushious Massacre around, because, you know, in as much as you can turn up in California and be a non-union actor and go to work on commercials and different sets and music videos and all of that, if you are a makeup artist, if you are a grip, if you are an electrician or an accountant, there are very stringent rules about where and whether you can work. And it may not be worth the expense of living here if you can't get a bite at the real lucrative apples. And I'm talking about you know, hair and makeup people make $50 and up on union sets. Let's not even talk about 8-hour rate versus time and a half after 8 versus double time after 10 versus at 16 hours, everyone starts making their day rate every hour, right? That's because of union rules. And watching the live with Lushious Massacre and Davina Garza, I was shocked that she would have Davina Garza, who seems like an elder, I could be wrong, but someone who's a guest in her home making content on her monetized channel and not have food and snacks and drink. That to me is an absolute sign of having, especially on a union set, you will not ever expect to have to struggle or be confronted with, what was it, 2-year-old granola from Los Angeles, which I'm sure was delicious, but you shouldn't have to scrounge, right? It's work. It's work that should be, if not compensated, maybe the compensation was, you know, let's just discussing the issue that Davina was having with this car dealership. But, you know, a couple of things about this whole story about, oh, you know, I was run out of Los Angeles and California and possibly union work or work on set by people who have no connection to Los Angeles, Hollywood, unions, networks, streaming services, or anything of that sort. It just doesn't add up. This is just me. And the fact that you would have people working in your home on your content with no snacks and food available suggests to me that maybe, this is just me, maybe Lushious Massacre got turned around because she's not a union member. And what it takes to get into IATSE Local 706, I believe, is you have to have, I think, 30 or 60 or 100 hours on a union set in order to be able to be eligible to join the union, pay the fees, and then be given an opportunity to work, not even necessarily consistently, but days here and there so you can get your hours and qualify to stay in that union. That's not access to the top jobs and the most stable jobs and the jobs that, you know, work 9 months out of the year and give you a 3-month break. It's a different animal. It's a worthy animal, let me tell you, but it's not like you can just show up and show out and expect to step in front of everybody who's, you know, already in on the game and has relationships that give them access to that work. Now, I could be wrong, but that to me seems like more the reason why, you know, go back to Texas where it's cheaper to live, where, you know, there's even rules about like what regions you're allowed to do non-union work in order to qualify, and then contact the union and ask either to flip your production to a union one or to have cumulative hours on a independent low budget film. And if you listen to Lushious Massacre talk, she's, you know, talked about like, you know, going through the gigs and working on different shows and projects and smaller things. And it sounds to me like, you know, whether it's a reality show for HBO, I don't believe it's scripted, whether it's an indie film that, you know, might be for some other producer, that to me sounds more like where a talented person from Texas may end up jumpstarting their career rather than, you know, being on Jimmy Kimmel with talent because, you know, maybe Shangela was the guest or someone like that, is not the same as being a staff makeup artist on Jimmy Kimmel. We know that these celebs have riders where they bring people they know, people they trust, you know, whether it's Mariah Carey or, you know, the people who do the hair for, you know, often it'll be like their relatives, right? Often it'll be someone that they know from another set, but that person comes in as like a package deal with them. Attempting to make these tiny thin lines on my nose. Have I gotten them close enough together? I don't know, but this is a very dark concealer. I should try to get a lighter concealer. You know, I don't pretend to know. This is truffle, super dark. I don't pretend to know everything about what I'm doing, which is why, you know, I end up watching Lushious Massacre and other folks as well. Just looking into our 3 panel mirror here and trying to chart a course to a sculpted cheek, you know, and just looking at how aggressive the contour is on Luscious's cheek. You know, I learn, right? And I appreciate learning from people, but you know, I listen with interest to all of these people having beef all over YouTube, right? I'm not a part of that, right? It's not my world, but you know, one or two things kind of, as we say in the academic community, it bumped me. Bumped me the idea that people who are outside the circle of professional Hollywood could affect her employability here. It bumped me the idea that you would have people basically producing work that pays you in your home or wherever you were shooting that live with Davina and not automatically have food and drink and, you know, anything available. It was strange, right? If that happened on any set where we work in Hollywood, we would call our SAG rep and they could possibly get the show shut down. And it wouldn't happen, you know, like certain unions you don't play with. That includes the Teamsters. You know, they've been known to go to, you know, right to work states where people were trying to hire all non-union crews. And this happened probably 2018, that the Teamsters went down there to this, you know, kind of scab set and they applied for it and got all the jobs. And on the day when the producer was standing in the forest or whatever, trying to be like, okay, guys, action rolling, they all just stood there with their hands folded. They are gangster, right? And they're also great because, you know, they get it, right? They make what, 30, 35 an hour, depending if they're driving a truck, depending on overtime. But when they strike, they are not a joke. And people have worked long and hard to have, you know, the benefits and the protections that accrue to union actors, union lighting people, union wardrobe people. It's not something to play with or disrespect. So I can see, you know, someone naively showing up in the town and thinking that, you know, because of pure talent, doors were going to open. Because believe me, there are union people who've been there before you who, you know, whether it's unkind or unfair, I can't say. They're going to hold those doors closed because they were there first. What tier of worker are you within the IATSE local? You know, it's not just a stroll in and right to work because it's not Texas. You can do that in Baltimore. You can travel around from state to state, and I've done it. You know, I didn't know anything about unions when I lived in New York. You know, when I worked at a network and I started doing producing and production work, I had no idea. But, you know, I've definitely learned, and, you know, we go through strikes, we go through delays, we go through all kinds of things that, you know, and the unions will vote to strike for, you know, increased protections of not only the access of union people who've paid their dues to the work, but also, you know, so people aren't having to drive themselves home after a long work day, or, you know, the whole concept of fratter day, like working late, starting late on a Friday, right? Your call time, and then having to work very late on that Friday so that basically you can't have a Saturday because you're exhausted and you're sleeping by the time you get home. Blah, 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 blah. All I'm saying is the short story is I don't think that, you know, any of these YouTubers were responsible for Lushious Massacr getting turned around from Hollywood. I think that if you're going to pursue union work, which is great work, by the way, you're going to have to follow union rules. And you may not have known that living in Brownsville, Texas. But, you know, pursuing different jobs and traveling around with Shangela, who's a person of African descent, right? And, you know, getting next to different, you know, beauty gurus and celebrities as you pursue set makeup work is great. But, you know, I don't know. It doesn't seem very responsible. I didn't know about the Aunt Jemima remarks. You know, I was buying the whole poor, poor innocent me discussion from Luscious. And, you know, she may in fact be innocent. She may in fact be remorseful for those remarks. I don't know. But, you know, moderating Chime Phillies Live by surprise last night, you know, there was some hard in the paint, either Luscious supporters or something, who were making all kinds of threats. And it's like, well, why don't you go tend to the business of, you know, the kind of clear and present racist remarks, right? And as much as other people have been found out and, you know, forced to take steps to atone for that, I think that's the page we need to be on as far as, you know, Luscious Massacre and her, you know, successful career. But let's not play games and pretend that there's reasons for leaving LA outside the ones that affect every worker. When we're on set, we see the PAs, you know, sucking up to different departments and even doing, you know, shall we say, special favors in order to get someone to get them into their union of choice, whether that's props or lighting or the people who put like plants and stuff around the set. I don't know what that department or what that union is called, but we see it and it's a serious thing, right? There are people who've been grandfathered into being set decorators and lead men and all these terms that you've never heard of. I've run into people who brag that their, you know, grandfather was the person who made shoes on this or that, you know, movie lot. And you're like, oh, cool. But to them, it's a big deal. They call themselves Hollywood royalty based on the fact that their family has been working below the line in Hollywood for generations. So again, you can't just stroll in from a right to work state like Texas, having no idea about any of this and think the doors are just going to open for you. Oh no, honey. Even the PAs that work here and get, I don't know what it is, they have to work 10 years. I had no idea. 10 years and get all these hours in order to have the right to go to a different region, right? They got to go to like North Carolina or New Orleans and then work there to get so many more hours. And then they can come back and possibly have the right to work as the next level up type worker, which I think is like a second AD, assistant director. And then from there to the second, to the key second, to the first AD. You know, I don't understand all that stuff, but I know that you can either do a program that's hard to get into, or you can do all the hours. All the hours for 10 years. Never mind what you have to go through to get enough hours, you know, without a special friend helping you get into that makeup union. It's going to be tough, and it's definitely not going to happen overnight. And there's a lot of people in line and are on a different tier than you, for the drivers, for everybody, right? It's not just about talent, it's access, who you know, and there's a whole lot of work to do beyond, you know, following celebrities around or taking photos at parties. Yes, social media is super important, and it's such an important kind of like dovetail to your own success and your celebrity and your portfolio. And that's right. Someone asked Luscious on the Davina Garza Live, like, oh, well, how did you find that opportunity? And she was like, well, all I'll say is that, you know, YouTube and Instagram were helpful. And it's like, is that is that a real answer, or is that a let me, you know, throw the ball and hide my hand, right? All these lives that are like, oh, I'm in the airport, I'm going here, I'm going there. It's great. But at the same time, it's a little bit, I'm a critical person, right? I love Luscious's makeup work. I have to hunt around to see the parts where she's actually doing the makeup so that I can do a better job than this, you know? But it's like, in order to search for those gems, I'm, you know, sort of listening to all of this other drama, all of this, everyone's out to get me, oh poor me, I was victimized in Hollywood, which happens, right? That definitely happens. And you know, I'm very keen to be aware of it and to learn about it and all that stuff, but it just doesn't add up. The people who will turn anyone around are more likely to be the union that restricts access to jobs and other union members who are like, oh yeah, gee, this is very nice, but sorry, you're not allowed until you are, you know, a tier whatever worker that, you know, they're not even allowed to hire you, right? The rules can get bent if you're friends with a producer or something like that. You know, someone can get you into the Teamsters, or but it's exceptional, right? It's like going to Hollywood and becoming an actor. Yes, it can happen overnight. Sometimes you'll have to pay into a system by like taking classes with a casting agent. There have been those scandals. There are other scandals where, you know, people have to, you know, pay to play in a sense. And that's just the way it is. It doesn't make it good or bad, but, you know, I would appreciate more candor and accuracy and not just making it seem like, you know, I very much doubt that Nick Snider and Dustin Daly are on the phone or on Twitter or on Instagram, you know, plotting against anyone. They have their own business and their own lives. You know, Rich Lux has his multiple daily posts to do. I don't see him, you know, pursuing somebody, you know, that allegedly maybe he fell out with on that level, right? He's trying to get the next rung up in his own career. And the bottom line is that, I'm sorry to say, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, allegedly, the whole theory of enemies or haters undermining Luscious Massacre and her career in Hollywood is cap, because it's much more likely to be about her lack of union membership, union hours, paying union dues, all those things. All those hurdles are serious so that you can get to the very delicious apple, which is making 50 plus hours, making 50 plus dollars an hour on long days, on movie sets, on television sets, on film sets, even on, you know, magazine shows and talk shows, and Drew Barrymore and all those people that Luscious Massacre has discussed having met. I don't believe that Luscious Massacre had any right to work on those sets unless she came bundled with a guest. And that's just my theory. I don't know for sure, but you know, I'll be very interested in anyone's opinion about what I think, because I know from working in Hollywood, it's not even possible to just expect or stroll up unless you have a family or producer friend connection. It ain't gonna happen, and you're gonna have to turn tail, go back to the right to work state where it's cheap to live, and hunt around for different reality show opportunities. If you just Google makeup artist reality show, makeup artist non-union, you will get job postings that will tell you, oh, $45 an hour and blah 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 blah. And those jobs are worthy and they're great, but they're not union jobs. There is a total divide between union work and non-union work. You know, when there was a writer's strike in, I think it was 2008, that's when all these like reality shows started being produced in great numbers, because they're cheaper to produce, because you're not paying actors, you're not paying writers, right? A show like what is it, America's Top Model, those story producers that I worked with on a show tried to organize to get recognized as writing the shows, right? They do what's called story producing and kind of map out where the reality show people will come and meet at the bar and throw a drink and all that stuff. They tried to unionize and get into the Writers Guild, but they all got fired, which is how they all ended up working on a show with me and trying to fire me because they didn't hire me. That's a whole other story. But you know, it's serious, right? There's money to be made. You make a ton of money, but it's not the same money that you would make if you were on a union show, working union, with not only your salary, but also getting residuals, you know, and depending on your, you know, creative role on the show, creator credit, all these other kinds of like fees and access to money and moving up the ladder that people can deny to you based on it not being a union show. The producers get to keep more of the money. The networks, including a network like HBO, get content to fill the hours that cost them far less than something that's scripted and has an author and has, you know, multiple locations. Game of Thrones versus a reality show, it's a world of difference in terms of budget, but it, you know, creates variety and different kinds of content that, you know, can be eligible for certain awards like GLAAD and all of that. It's great to have those opportunities, but let's not play games and try to make it seem like, you know, people had to hear Lushious Massacr talk about her persecution by her, you know, a community of haters, including, you know, perhaps and allegedly, you know, Rich Lux and Chime Philly and all these people who ultimately are just trying to get their coins up on this platform, you know, and Lushious Massacre is doing lives and content to get her coins up on this platform. You know, I don't think Davina Garza got paid and she had to eat stale granola. That's not cute. If you worked on set, that's not something that is done with talent. And it's not, you know, you can always be a better producer. You can always be a more considerate friend. But, you know, when you work on set and you work in production, you see the different levels. You see what happens on a Shondaland scripted show set. You see what the catering is like when Kenya Barris is making a show that's going to travel to Fiji. You see what the difference is when you work on like a T-Pain Juicy J video where Little Dicky shows up to steal shots. A music video, they're going to bring a lot of people to perform and work, and they're going to pick and choose who they pay. And they can get away with it because overnight the production company is gone. No one's name is on it. It doesn't live anywhere. You can't find anyone, and then you just got took, right? Just like the people at the car dealership played with our friend Davina Garza and her property, right? They pick and choose who they can rob or make a fool of, let's be honest. And, you know, we're dealing with viewers in the YouTube space who may be younger, who may be more trusting, especially of people that they like. And I think that there's an unfortunate margin of space where people can, if not lie, then misrepresent the truth. I don't know that I am in any position to figure out what the truth of the matter is, but I will tell you that I have my strong suspicions that ultimately it wasn't Nick Snider or Rich Lux who, you know, scuttled the experience and the pursuit of work for Lushious Massacre here in California. That's not how it works. You know, there are very few successful or even influential YouTubers, you know, who seem to come up with more reality show work, from David Dobrik to, you know, Jake Paul and Logan Paul and all them people. It's like boxing event. It's, you know, reality show on YouTube about their family. They may be featured in some other kind of show, but it's not like they are, you know, maybe who's that girl who was dancing on TikTok who had a scripted movie during the last summer, the one who got in trouble for greeting Donald Trump somewhat enthusiastically. I can't remember her name. It'll come to me. I haven't eaten breakfast yet, but, you know, in any case, there is a big difference between self-produced YouTube work, reality shows that are mostly non-union. I want to say, unless it's on network, it's not going to be union at all, but I don't know for sure. And then scripted shows where there are very strong union hiring rules and union protections, and the door is pretty much shut to people who aren't members of those unions. And, you know, that is to create a requirement for the producers to stick to union talent. I can't say that that's a bad thing, you know, given what we do see in these streets, right? Producers try to play with workers, right, to keep the money, you know, even play with the unions, right? There was a IATSE strike that almost happened this fall, you know, when we got emails from production telling us that things might shut down, and we were ready. And, you know, we certainly saw people supporting the unions because, you know, having more rest, having better pay, all those things are good for all union workers, right? The dominoes can fall in the favor of the worker if you have union protections. But again, if you live somewhere like Texas that celebrates, quote, freedom and right to work and all that, and, you know, it's like people trying to organize at Amazon, right? Or Uber, or, you know, any of those big companies where, you know, there's a setup for the people in charge to keep most of the profits, right? As opposed to a Costco, as opposed to, you know, union movies, as opposed to, you know, places where worker protections are considered important, right? And I've heard people criticize unions. I've heard people talk about, you know, lazy, overpaid, unqualified, you know, prices go up and all of that. But it's like there's a whole much larger discussion about living wages and, you know, access to, you know, middle class lifestyles here in the States, you know, as opposed to other countries where, you know, paid maternity and paternity leave and access to education and healthcare is a given, right? And I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other. All I'm saying, I'm just stippling this Dermablend leg and body foundation over this contour and highlight and seeing where things go. But, you know, we are fortunate to work and, you know, spend time in California where, you know, for as much as people during political elections always complain like, oh, liberals, oh, illegal immigration and all of that, it's like when you come down to it, California and its economy of entertainment makes so much money. Like, no lie, California is footing the bill. Look at this little gnat on my sponge. What a disaster. Good Lord. Go away. But, you know, people malign this very powerful economic engine in California and want to point the finger and say, oh, the liberals are to blame and da 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 da. But, you know, when we turn on the heat or the electricity in California, it works, as opposed to what's been going on, you know, in past years and winters in Texas, right? When we want to deal with, you know, poor people or homeless people or people who've come from other countries, right? There's a set of resources that people seek out and migrate to California from other places, right? The people living on the beach aren't from Cali. They're from Tennessee and West Virginia and all these places where adults don't have their natural teeth anymore. So all I'm suggesting is that, you know, when you hear people criticize unions or union rules or whatever, the people who are striking at Kellogg's, you look a little bit more deeply into it and figure out what you actually think and believe about those rules that, yes, in my opinion, allegedly may have kept Lushious Massacr from accessing, you know, the most desirable job opportunities here in California. She may have had to reset, go back home with the family that she missed, you know, kind of fearing the malice of, you know, people that she knew from YouTube that she didn't necessarily get along with. But, you know, her work with Shangela kind of gave her a moment in time in, you know, Puerto Vallarta, or wherever they were when they took that picture with Jeffree Star. And, you know, that's fair, right? We all have to be nice to people at work that we don't necessarily, they're not our favorite. We're not sending them Christmas cards, but, you know, people say clout chasing and all those big terms. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's like, you're not going to embarrass your boss or your colleague by being aggro, right? And everyone understands that. I understand it. That's a lot of product. Now we look plastic. I don't necessarily like to live in the plastic place. So let's keep bouncing this big beauty sponge now that we've run the gnat off. Why does the gnat come here? There's all fruit in the kitchen. There's all water. I have a dish of water, and yet it wants to be on the green sponge. Why? But you know, we're trying to get to looking human. Are we succeeding? But in any case, those are my theories. You know, I think that the union rules and union membership had something to do with turning Miss Massacre around, sending her back home to pursue work, as she says, on reality shows and different things where there may have been a stronger opportunity. You know, people always need makeup artists of color. They're in very short supply. And, you know, people who are LGBT to be hired onto projects that are LGBT in nature. Not solely on those projects. We're certainly seeing a lot more diversity on mainstream sets. I can remember the first time I heard a woman director boss the crew around, and I craned my head up like I was a meerkat. Like, what? Like, it was like the first time I got catcalled by a woman in Manhattan near what is it? Near Union Square, and I was coming out of Whole Foods, and it was like, what? It was a very petite Puerto Rican woman, but maybe more like a stud. I'm not really sure, but I remember being shocked. But the first time I heard a woman directing on set here in California was a shock. That doesn't happen often. It happens a lot more often now, right? Especially as you get into ethnic people directing as well. Lou Diamond Phillips, you know, Helen Hunt, who had been on that Mad About You show. You know, Angela Bassett directs. All kinds of different people are directing on shows, from Criminal Minds to SWAT to, you know, all kinds of like different procedurals, and that didn't happen for a very long time. And, you know, I think it's great if Lushious Massacre is riding that wave of diversity and able to, you know, sort of be all the beautiful self that she is in terms of her gender identity and her sexual orientation and her skill. But that skill in a non-union person without hours and without having paid the fees that are the engine that makes the unions operate, it's a no-go in California, and it's a no-go in states that are not right to work. So I would think that, you know, New York and California especially are probably out of the question, again, unless you're coming in the entourage of a celebrity. And it's great because it gives you a taste and it gives you an ability to learn and get your hours here and there. But let's take the devil horns off of our YouTube friends and really try to educate our audience with the brass tacks of how the business works, and not just tell tales, because it's not constructive. And then you're, you know, sending people into a tizzy where they want to, you know, go and whatever, hate mob people's lives and make all these threats about reporting. Like, what is there to report? If people are telling the truth, and especially if they're showing clips of Lushious Massacre and her own words and her own commentary, then who's the bad guy if these are the things that Lushious Massacre actually said? Why is it, you know, Chime Philly's fault for, you know, bringing these things to light? If they didn't exist, then they wouldn't be being discussed, right? And if the fault lays with the person who said them or did them in the first place, then, you know, that's fair, right? You did it, stand on it, 10 toes down. Aunt Jemima style, Aunt Jemima, whatever, stand on that. That's what you want to say? Tell Shangela. You know, if you want to, you know, get in the face of different creators and performers of color, and you want to be all hugged up and next to them when they're with Jeffree Star or Lady Gaga, stand on it. Don't be shy. You weren't shy when you did it. You weren't shy when you said it. So why should anyone have to tiptoe around and act scared to discuss it? I don't see it that way, right? I'm just trying to get some kind of basic skill level doing my makeup. You know, I got to hunt around through all these long lives to get any sense of what's going on. So that's my dilemma. But, you know, I encourage people to consider union work. You know, I think that when Lushious Massacre is qualified to join the union, she'll be a real asset, and she'll find a community of very well paid, very, you know, pleasant, and, you know, it'll kind of up her game of, you know, people have to be trustworthy, they have to be careful, they have to hold their tongue. There's not going to be any popping off or having beef and that kind of stuff. Oh no. I think what Lushious Massacre should be learning now is how to stop dragging people, and in that way protect her professional opportunities, because that's not going to be tolerated on any set. You know, people who act up get sent home. There's plenty of people who want access to that work, and they don't have to choose people who act up or, you know, say things that can create lawsuits, right? You start, you know, creating hostile work environments and slurs, and it's so cute to demean other people of color. That ain't gonna fly, right? You think it's cute to, you know, say these things, and then you don't want to have anyone hear or see, you don't want to be held accountable. Well, welcome to the digital world, because that's not how it works. You don't get to, there's no takesies, backsies. It's out there. And, you know, I think Chime Philly has done a great job of making entertainment and bringing certain things to light that I certainly didn't know about. I wasn't aware. And I consider myself a Lushious Massacre fan. And again, I don't think that she needs to be canceled, but I think she needs to be corrected, right? And that's all these discussions are here to do, just to correct an unfortunate set of choices, right? An unfortunate set of irresponsible characterizations of who was responsible for her return from California to Texas, right? No one needs to get dragged or blamed who isn't responsible for that. And if it's about union business and qualifying to join the union, say that, right? And if, as for anything you said that wasn't kind and put the blame on people who aren't responsible, well, it's time to step up and correct that. It's not that hard, really. You've seen a lot of people do it. Get out your gray hoodie, sit on the floor, talk about how shocked you were to learn and all the rest of it. You know, get it done and then get on with life. It's beautiful. You're in a beautiful place in your career, and there's no reason to compromise it over, you know, some old, stale, sour haterade. You know, who were you trying to demean with those comments about Aunt Jemima and the comments about, you know, other people having run you out of Hollywood? It's just not responsible. That's not going to reflect well in the long run. And if there's ever a time to learn your lesson and improve, that would be now. Because you try that with, you know, large media companies that have assets on the line, right? It's just like COVID. It's not that people want to force people to believe what they believe about COVID and vaccine and all that. It's about the liability. It's always about the liability. You can't play games. You can't talk that talk. You can't say irresponsible things, because then your ability to be trusted is very much in jeopardy. And that is the last thing that you want to do if you want access to premium jobs and premium people and the best of the best. And I think what's great is that Lushious Massacre has been getting access to that in the most beautiful way. But, you know, there's just a little cleanup on aisle 7 that needs to happen. If we get back into this Maddie Ziegler palette, right? What was unsatisfying about the Creme Shop palette was the lack of darks, right? So we put some bronzer. Oh, and there is a mirror in this palette. Fancy town. Not every Morphe palette has that. But if we kind of look at where we've gone with some bronzer in the crease, right? Maybe we can use some kind of brush or puff just to even out this blush. It's looking a little spotty. All right, we did some contouring. Maybe it doesn't look insane, but the thing I did get from Lushious Massacr was like drawing on a very harsh jaw contour, and maybe that's a little too harsh. No, we want to make it blend. We want to make it look a little bit more seamless, right? A little bit more kind of shrinking our face in a feminine way, but not looking insane. But yeah, if we take some kind of random brush, take a mid-tone and get that across the lid. We did Latte last time, but maybe let's go with Crushed, which is this kind of watermelon-y color. Is that too much? It's not a neutral, but it is. Is it a matte or a shimmer? Maybe that's not the ideal thing. If we did Latte before, maybe let's go with M3, which is right here. But yeah, believe it or not, I am trying to hurry and get these looks on and then shoot what I need to shoot in the kitchen and get on with life. But yeah, that's my big theory. That's my big theory and discussion, and it's just my thought. Just from having worked here and observed things, you know, and knowing some really talented makeup artists that work with me on indie films, and I never see them on set. Even the people who do like Hallmark movies, whatever union they're in, I never see them in town, only up in kind of Santa Clarita, Simi Valley, right? That's a different level. That's different than actually working on any of the main studio lots here in town, or working, you know, on shows that have like big budgets, big sponsors, big impact, right? And you know, cable is great. Cable and streaming are great, but that's not where the biggest audiences and the biggest money tend to be, unless it's The Mandalorian. You know, you look at ratings for different shows, even shows you love, and you see how minuscule ratings can be unless you're, you know, pulling down big numbers on there are shows that have been going on network for 15 seasons, 18 seasons, and then streaming networks are trying to bring back some of the ones that have been canceled, right? On a different network or on the streaming service of the parent company. And again, this is big business. This is not playtime. This isn't, you know, being catty and making stuff up, and any of that kind of stuff is going to put the kibosh on your career. So if I can be helpful in any way, I hope that what I'm suggesting to Luscious and her friends is like, it's time to stop playing that game, because long term, that ain't going to be it. It just isn't going to help you. It's not going to help anyone else. Now, we're in a brown place, and we have some odd brights. This green is rather bright, but maybe it'll blend to make something of impact. We're taking a Bobbi Brown Essentials eyeshadow brush, and let's try to stamp that in the outer corner. Just in the outer corner without going too high. Sometimes I feel like I get my eyeshadow map slightly wrong by going up too high and not really emphasizing just that corner, right? Looking down into the mirror. But, yeah, those are my 2 cents. You know, I'll be interested to know what anyone thinks of what I think are some issues with, you know, it's been distressing to see people that I quite like arguing or, you know, wishing people well in that gritted teeth way. But, you know, it certainly happens. It certainly happens on set, but this is not the right moment to be, you know, having that be your signature on the YouTube space or in any way. When people Google search you, you don't want that coming up. You want, you know, it's that fake Hollywood, I love everybody, everybody loves me, and conflict is top secret. right? And your ability as a hair and makeup person, right? People vent to you, people are in your chair, you see them at their vulnerable moments, you should be able to keep your mouth shut, right? Just like Luscious is holding back on saying exactly how she got her job, you know, she needs to operate with the same level of discretion about these conflicts and blaming people who maybe aren't to blame, right? If I'm right, then, you know, I think that people who are on YouTube and living in right to work states like Texas, they don't know anything about a union because they're kept, you know, in as much as the education system is controlled in states where they don't want poor people to know what's up, then, you know, the media can do the same thing, reinforce the people thinking bad things about unions and reinforce people thinking that there's no reason that, you know, workers who create product and value, you know, thinking that they shouldn't have anything. They shouldn't have any rights. They shouldn't have any, you know, access to, in a way, the fruits of their labor, right? And everyone has a choice, right? You can live in Texas and not be in a union, but if you want to get down with the top people in the top productions, you generally have to get, you know, and if you want the best safety and the best catering and the best crafty and snacks without having to ask for it, ahem, then you want to get yourself on a union set where there are union rules and people aren't trying to act surprised when people are hungry and thirsty on set for hours for profit. It would be one thing if it was Davina Garza's channel, but it wasn't. It's Lushious Massacr's channel, and Davina's doing labor for you. So if you're not going to pay her, maybe you're helping, but you need to make sure that food and drink are right there next time, I hope. We're putting this color called To the Moon on our inner 2/3. You know, we're working it out on a Sunday. A little bit of a rant, you know, a little bit of an advocating for, you know, workers' rights, right? I was under contract at a big media company for years, and it was a great experience, but I wasn't union. I never got paid overtime. And, you know, it was certainly annoying to have to fill out timesheets and all that jazz when I came to work in California, even when I was working on a reality show for HBO. But, you know, it was well worth it, and I had a really good experience. I don't know if there's any need for an inner corner highlight past this gold. I think this gold and green over M3, which is kind of it's kind of like a, I don't know what this is. It's like a, maybe like a cafe au lait color, because latte is more yellow. And I think M3 is a little bit more rust, right? It's getting that on the inner 2/3. And maybe we can afford to put a sharp line of some kind of liner at the lash line on the inner and the outer third. We had used Go Home last time, which is this maroon color. But we also have Pantera, which is a black. We have some shimmers, including this electric blue posse, or is it purple? What do you think? Right here. Maybe we'll try that. And this favorite brush of ours, it's the number 7 from BH Cosmetics. They might be in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, but if we get that carefully on the end of our brush and then look into the mirror and stamp, wham, right? Do it on the other side. Look into the mirror and stamp. That looks very exciting. I mean, it could be sharper at the tail, but you know, again, just getting out of that constant need to swirl and make circles, but really respecting the game of stamp. And a nice stiff brush with significant pigment on it. Dance that across the lash line. You know, I don't tend to want to put a lot of color underneath my eyes. I try to do it, but it doesn't look the best on my eye shape. But I am loving this shimmery inner 2/3 and then an outer corner with some depth, and then a liner that, you know, we're just trying to stay away from black where we can. And stamp that purple along the lash line. On top, I don't think we need to get into our waterline, but, you know, I struggle with the inner corner. I think that looks pretty. I mean, you know, practice makes perfect. I'm definitely getting better. And I'm an interested student, right? COVID has made it like we need to, you know, do what we can kind of to reduce our exposure to makeup artists and other people who work closely with main cast. Main cast can, you know, be a vector of infection. So as much as we can reduce our exposure to other actors and the people who are exposed to other actors, that's better for us. You know, we're trying to take our coins home and be fine and avoid the hospital, right? You know, I don't want to get into Lushious Massacr and her remarks about the people, the healthcare people that took care of her. It's not my business, but I think I've done enough commenting on the whole business of set and unions and all of that. I hope I've contributed something constructive to, you know, what is an ongoing conflict, right? It's a little tiresome to hear people, you know, constantly carrying on, and, you know, some people are very tight-lipped about the conflict, but other people are still, you know, playing the blame game, and it's kind of stale drama, and it's also kind of maybe not appropriate, right? The reasons may have been quite different than the ones that we were told, right? Is it sad fishing? Is it none of our business? Is it an inaccurate telling of exactly why you might have had to come right back home? You know, dreams and all of that aside, unions don't give a damn. You gonna follow their rules and they gonna run your pockets before you get access to, you know, great, beautiful, amazing experiences on union sets. You know, I can't regret any of the work that I've gotten access to. And I encourage everyone to at least consider. This is an Iman Sexy Pink lip liner, right? Got these on eBay. Not sure if they're still for sale, but I think given the subtlety and the prettiness of all this color on these lids, this is way more color than I would feel comfortable doing. But I've been watching a lot of Lushious Massacr and seeing a lot of geometry and all kinds of stuff that I can see why it takes her hours to do her makeup. It makes sense and it's beautiful. But let's not tell stories about Hollywood, and let's not pretend that non-union, non-producer types had any influence over your employment. Unless you were talking about YouTube, I don't see how and why that could ever be the case. It just wouldn't be the case. If you're not in the food chain, they don't care what you think, right? But in the meantime, you know, you keep running up all this foul discussion, it's going to make people question your loyalty and your discretion, and you don't want that. This is a Pinkies Up color from our friends at e.l.f. It worked out very nicely and gave us a nice balanced sheer lip color that, you know, worked out real well yesterday. Lips are getting chapped because we haven't eaten breakfast yet. Let's get it done. But yeah, that's House of Tanya. House of Tanya's deep in the game. I'm listening to these people on the YouTube, but I have one foot in Hollywood, and, you know, I know a little something about how things work. I don't want, you know, Shangela or anyone to be embarrassed by an overt or a covert racist of any color. That's just not appropriate. It is long past the time where people of color should be flexing and trying to act white or act racist or white adjacent in public. It's not cool. It's not acceptable. You know, I'm sure I'm not the only person who would wag their fingers at Miss Massacre and suggest that she can do better, especially if you're working for Shangela and people who are progressive, you know. I hear other Texas creators talking a lot of, you know, a lot of really conservative kind of craziness. Like, people want all the benefits of, you know, the arts and being artistic, and then they want to, you know, shade people out and be unprogressive and, you know, racist and clown slaves and clown the victims and clown victims of oppression and of violence and all that stuff. And it's not, you know, no hate, only support. We just want you to do better. Apologize and move on. You know, mend fences with our other beloved creators and, you know, tamp down the conflict. Everyone can get their coins up. It makes for juicy YouTube posts, but, you know, as you see, when you're in these streets, you got to smile and play nice because it's ultimately about business, right? So let's keep it 100. Thank you for joining me here on House of Tanya. I'm continuing to be pursued by this gnat, but I'm going to get in the kitchen, make some apple juice, clean my sneakers, and also try to remove the last horrible sticker from the back of my 3-panel mirror. So you'll see some shorts from me in a little bit. House of Tanya, thank you for joining me. Until next time.